Very much. Welcome everybody to this March 28th Community Engagement and Communications meeting. We would welcome our YouTube audience as well. And we will start by doing some quick introductions. And so the first person I see is Dr. Iverson.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Dr. Linda Iverson, Superintendent, Greenburgh Central School District.
I'm Jamal Thomas, Chair of the CEC. David Warner.
I am David Warner, board member and proud parent of Woodlands graduate.
Samantha.
Samantha Ives, don't worry, I'm parked. I am a Bailey parent, Jackson parent, and president of Highview PTA.
Terrence. You're on mute.
I apologize. Terrence Jackson, Commissioner for the Department of Community Resources in the town of Greenburgh, lifelong resident, graduate, and former board member.
Steven. Steven?
Sorry about that. I thought I would unmute and I actually wasn't. Steve Morton, I'm the Vice President of the PTA Council. I have two boys in Woodlands High School, doing very well. I'm also a professional photographer, media consultant, and a lifelong area resident.
Francis?
Years ago, my wife and I were the co-chairs of the ECP PTA, proud parents of two children who have gone through pre-K through high school and beyond in the district, and current grandparent of a child that's in the school district.
Edith?
My name is Edith Horn. I am a concerned citizen. I'm also an educator of 40 years experience here in Westchester County, early childhood and elementary education.
Lloyd.
I guess you said Lloyd, did you?
I did.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was just always endorsed and doing other things while I'm listening. It's nice you giving me a call. I appreciate it. And I'm delighted to be at the meeting. My name is Lloyd Court. Forget the C. The C is just so that you can be challenged. I'm elated. I have two youngsters that went through the system and have been doing excellent as far as the business world is concerned. I'm elated about that. That means that there is victory yet for Woodlands. And I'm here to make sure that that happens.
Thank you. Thank you. Mona?
Hi, I'm a resident of Poets Corner. I previously volunteered at Highview prior to COVID. Currently not doing so because of COVID restrictions, but still interested in the ongoings of the GCSD.
Hey, Liz.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Liz Anastasi. I'm the head of youth services over at Greenburgh Public Library.
Kelly?
Sorry. Hi, my name is Kelly Ross Johnson. I'm a parent of a 6th grade boy that is at R.J. Bailey School. And I grew up in the system. I graduated from Woodlands.
Now this says Jalen, but I believe it's a different name.
Mary Spells.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm Mary D. Spells. I have two adult daughters who graduated from Woodlands. One is a doctor of pharmacy, and the other one is a guidance counselor, master's degree. I have a granddaughter, who is Jalen, who graduated last year, and she goes to Westchester Community College. And then a 4-year-old who's just beginning in preschool. So I'm here for the long haul.
Roy?
Mary's always a tough act to follow. Good evening, everybody. Roy Fenichel. I am a Woodlands parent.
And Sarah.
Hi, I am Sara Lazari. I'm a concerned community member. My younger child is registered for ACP next year. And at that time, I will also bring my older child back to the district. She'll be in 2nd grade.
All righty. Well, thank you, everybody. I did put the meeting agenda in the chat. I am going to currently pull up the meeting minutes from our last meeting to go over them. Can you give me rights to share? Right now it says it's disabled.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll share the agenda link again.
Okay, try now.
Thank you. Okay, so for our last meeting, which was February 28th, we had in attendance Dr. Iverson, Jessica Muldoon, Francis Sheehan, David Warner, Samantha Ives, Edith Horn, Stephen Morton, Liz Anastasi, Sara Lazari, and Kelly Ross.
You're showing the agenda.
Okay. Oh, stop sharing. Jeez. Got all these windows open.
There you go.
Okay. So we adopted the meeting minutes for the 1/22/22 meeting, and then we had an update from our superintendent. She did give an update because we had just dropped the mask mandate. There was an update on there was discussion about school visitation and desk shields. At the time, we were awaiting additional guidance from the state. Perhaps we'll get an update on that this evening. Weekly testing program is still in effect at the schools. We talked a little bit about the fact that contract tasting and notification program is in fact still in effect. Dr. Iverson went over the coming partnership between the public library and the district. We talked about the summer reading program, which is going to be kicked off. As well as monthly meetings that are going to start to take place between the librarians and the public library, as well as the book talks that will be done in conjunction with the library. Dr. Iverson spoke about some of the internship opportunities, and David actually mentioned some things that related to WISE projects and the various different opportunities that are available for students in WISE this year. We were looking to, Dr. Iverson talked about what some of the various different things that can be operationalized in terms of new programs related to internships. Some things will not be this year, they'll be next year. And then I believe it was Jessica Muldoon talked to us about CDOS learning standards and how they relate to internships. We talked about possibly having the principals join us at a future CEC meeting, just to have a kind of discussion on what the flow looks like from one school to the other in an effort to help parents best understand. In terms of final kind of questions and comments, we had a community member mention the fact that we must still be vigilant around COVID and requested saliva tests instead of nose swabs. Liz brought up the poetry contest that's happening at that will be happening at the library, and David again shared about the Nettie Jackson Extra Mile Award. Does anybody see anything there that needs amendment?
I think it may be contact tracing. Look at the words contact tracing and see if the spell checker did violence to it. Contract testing should be contact tracing.
Yep. That wasn't spell check. That was just me. Okay. Anything else? Hearing nothing, I move that we adopt the meeting minutes from our February 28th, 2022 meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
As
Well,
amended.
As amended? Robert's rules, man, Robert's rules. Any discussion? All right, so meeting minutes adopted. Okay, so tonight we're going to have some updates from Dr. Iverson, and take it away.
So I try to keep updates in front of the community and parents through my weekly message or video. The video messages, if you remember, are not always conducted by me. It could be anyone in the central administration. The one last week was on the budget. This week, today we met on the message for this week, and it's going to be more curriculum focused from Dr. Macaluso, so that you hear from all the big buckets of the work. But I did mention in the message this weekend, this Friday, about COVID, how we have, we're backing off more and more off of the restrictions. Our transmission rate of COVID in Westchester County continues to be low, as well as in the district. We have virtually no participation in our Test to Stay program. And we still have weekly testing with Veramis, and those numbers are very, very low. So we are going to re-examine what's next. I'm talking to other superintendents. Many have just stopped these programs. We're not there yet because we all occasionally will have a COVID case, but the numbers are low, which is a good thing. So we're thinking around what are we going to do next? We do have an abundance of tests. And so we're just in that discussion now. Basically, you govern yourselves around COVID. If you are immune compromised, you can still wear masks. They're optional. If you're coming to the building for any reason and you're knowing you're going into a crowd and you're uncomfortable, keep your distance and wear a mask. It's self-governing at this point. No restrictions, no mandates. You determine your level of care for COVID. You can continue to get vaccinated if you are not. Parents or anyone at this point can still join our Test to Stay program or our weekly testing program. If you think about Test to Stay, when it first came out, the whole thought about it was it's a 5-day program. You have to have been exposed to someone in COVID in school. And instead of being home for 5 days quarantining, you could just test each day. If you were negative, come in. If you're not, you go home. Recently, we're thinking, and it had to be test days. So if you had to test 5 days during school, the weekends did not count. But recently, we're beginning to think about quarantine is quarantining because parents who don't decide to do Test to Stay and their child becomes exposed, they can decide to just keep them home too for 5 days. So if you're home 5 days and you don't Test to Stay, what difference does it make if why can't the weekend count? Originally in Test to Stay, the weekends did not count. Quarantining is quarantining. So what we're backing off so far is if you start Test to Stay on a Wednesday, and then you have 5 days you must test, but there's a Saturday and Sunday, it's quarantining, and we're letting kids come back in on that Monday, rather than in the past, you still had to test 2 days of school. So because we're just seeing this, it's the same thing. So more information on that as we think about Test to Stay, but our numbers are low. We're opening up our facilities. Activities are being scheduled. Our facilities are being requested for rental. Our athletic fitness center is open for the public to come in. This year, the high school will have a full commencement ceremony, and our 6th graders at Bailey will have a full promotion exercise over at the high school. I talked to the principals at the elementary level. They're beginning to plan activities with the PTAs, those end of the year activities that normally go on. assemblies, monthly programs, field day. They're beginning to plan those. And the step-up programs that we do for the grades moving up, they're in the process of planning those, as well as there are going to be some trips planned for the seniors of the high school and I think for Bailey as well. So we're back to normal and we're governing ourselves accordingly. You see a lot of masks still in schools, all self-selected among the students and staff. It is their choice to do that. So that's the update on COVID. Any questions? Yes,
I just wanted to let people know for the public, one of my sons is immune compromised. He's still wearing his mask. He had no bullying. The kids have been perfectly fine. He said 3/4 of the kids are wearing masks, a couple don't. And he said nobody is infringing on anybody. He said he's at Woodland every day. He said he feels comfortable. And the teachers, everybody are respecting the fact that he has a mask on. So I give credit to the kids and the teachers because it's working. And I appreciate the fact that he has the option. And it's important to let the public know that the kids are fine. If as long as they can respect each other, they'll be fine.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Stephen. We definitely appreciate it, and I'm glad to hear. And thank you, Dr. Iverson, for coming in and creating a culture where that's how everybody is approaching this. David?
I had a question. I don't have the information in front of me. There was going to be an art show sponsored by IB at the high school, and I thought it was on the 8th, but it would be in the morning, but I don't know the exact hours. Do you have any information on that?
No, I will have to.
All right, so we'll try and find something out about that. Okay.
So since the last meeting, we have begun to plan for the summer. We've had several meetings too with the librarians and Liz Anastasia, who's on the call. We are going to resume our summer reading program, and I'll lean to Liz. Thank you for being on here because you can give more specific details where we engage in book talks in the schools. The last meeting we had, we chose the books that per grade students will be reading. And Liz, can you chime in with where we are with that?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so the last meeting we had was with myself and Dr. Iverson and the school librarians. So we have some deadlines. We're going to meet to pick the books that are going to be selected for summer reading for the different grades. So we'll have those. We're also going to be having lists of other suggested reading so that those lists every year when the library gets those, the public library gets those lists, we make sure to buy a whole bunch of copies of each in all different formats, large print, Spanish, audiobooks, digital books, etc. So we'll make sure to have a lot of copies to support the needs of the students. And as far as for the launch of the summer reading, we're going to be restarting our public library visits in the classrooms to say, yay, it's summer, this is all the stuff we're doing. So we'll be having that coming in addition to book talks and library card signups. So that we're looking forward to as well.
Thank you. Mona?
Yeah, we used to do a big event at Town Hall in the spring also with arts and music and a big event. I don't know if they're still doing that now with COVID. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so not this year. Those are things that, we're just coming off of another year of COVID, opening up as much as we can. We are beginning to plan that calendar next year and many of those things will be included. We just aren't able to operationalize this late in the year, everything. But yes, very good activities that we still believe in and would love to showcase with our students.
Yeah, I didn't know if Town Hall was even considering such a thing with COVID. Thank you very much, Dr. Iverson.
Terrence, did you still have a question or?
No, I got my answer. Thank you so much.
Okay. I do have a question related to the summer reading program and the book choices. I'm wondering if this might not be, a good time to introduce a little bit of, student voice into the overall equation, and perhaps give students an opportunity to decide, on some of the books. And well, actually, the question part would be, is it like book club, or is it just everybody reads themselves, or like how does the program actually work?
Well, I think you're a mind reader, because one of the things that the school librarians were talking about doing was having a few different options, and then the kids could vote. So they would be having a say in what books they would be reading. It was also suggested that we were going to try and, or that the school was going to try and each student would hopefully get a physical book that they could keep, which would be part of their summer reading. And then they would have other books in addition to that, depending on what the assignments were per grade, or how it was going to be distributed. So they will be having a chance to vote. So that'll be cool.
Okay. It's just in addition to the voting, I wonder if there may be some books that the library is not necessarily privy to, or that we don't know that kids are loving, in some way, shape, form, or fashion. That maybe we might want to give them the opportunity to decide even on what gets voted on. So, but obviously up to you guys.
Thank you. That would be great. We'll make sure to mention that the next time we meet, or the next time we meet with the school librarians. That's a great idea.
Thank you much. Thank you much. Dr. Iverson, do you have anything else?
We are planning summer school that was in place last year at Highview. You'll hear more about that. Dr. Macaluso and his team is beginning to plan for that. So we will have that for students who according to our data, could benefit from that. And so more details on that. I think I should have that by our next meeting. So that's.
I would be interested in that. In the past.
Yeah, cut it out.
I'm sorry. In the past, we did a connection with the summer school that, depending on the time frame you all were doing it, kids were coming to Theodore Young Center for summer camp after the mid part of the day. That surely could be worked on again, as long as we have that early communication, and we can hopefully hold some spots for you. We're expecting to fill up pretty quickly. Numbers are running great at the moment, but we can possibly hold some if we get that information early enough.
I'll be in touch with you tomorrow to set up a time to talk.
All right.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Yes, it's good to have them have some enrichment and some activities in addition to them having time to catch up on academics. So,
I was going to throw out really quick, and I wanted to see if anything popped into anybody's head. And I don't know whether this can be done or can't be done, but in terms of, so is it just summer school that we're having, or will there be some type of summer programming outside of summer school? So are we only going to have something for students that need the additional support because perhaps they didn't, they were behind this year, or will there be some type of additional summer enrichment programming that maybe came from some of the dollars and cents that was sent from the government to that relates to summer enrichment?
So we're trying to do a combination of both. It will be for academic loss, but we're trying to not have a day where students don't also have some time for enrichment with other activities. So that's where I know the vision is right now. And so I will have an update at the next meeting. We're just beginning to talk about that. So that was summer school. It was brought up at the CEC meeting about the Superintendents Tea, a phrase that was coined prior to me by my predecessor, and whether or not we were going to have that. That too was on the calendar. I know that was not on the calendar, but that's something I know the community has been used to. So I did say to the committee last time, I will look into that and see. I'm still in the discussion piece of that. It will not be a tea, but I'm trying to think about how to frame that and what I would do. I hope to have more information for you in April. My initial thoughts are about a first year showcase of what we've accomplished around our practices and data and systems and structures, having the principals showcase some of the data that they worked on. Each principal was given the direction to identify a data point they really wanted to work on this year as part of their own professional growth. And so they're going to be showcasing that through a data showcase. So I was thinking of connecting that to just highlighting our first year coming off COVID, but haven't really structured it. I was talking to Ivy today and thinking of a nice phrase to call it. And so just wanted to make you aware, because we did talk about that last time. I know if that is something the community would still like to see done, I would be open to hearing that now. I just wanted you to know I heard you. And if that's something, I do like that idea. It's a nice connector to the community. I'm certainly would love to do that, but I wanted to at least bring that back up, as that was a topic we talked about last time. Some had questions around that.
Does anybody have any questions and or comments related to your experience with the Superintendent Teas before? Perhaps what was done then that you would like to see continued, or maybe pieces that, you know, that weren't necessary? Any thoughts? Dave?
Before we did Superintendent's Teas, we did meet the principals sometimes. And that meant that you just did the principals, not the principals in the central office. And it was a lot shorter. You didn't necessarily have to eat. If COVID is your concern there, then you can get a lot out of that. And it's a snappier presentation because there aren't as many people taking their turn to talk. But I think that would work just fine.
And David, are you speaking about that as being something, because we've talked about that a number of times, are you talking about that as something that we do that during one of our CEC meetings, or are you talking about that being a separate event that we?
What normally happened was that if there was a month during which there was a CEC meeting and that event came along, that superseded the CEC meeting, because that was community engagement, right?
Got it. Sylvia?
Yes, I think David is on point. We do need to hear from the individual principals. Also, listening to parents, they're really very concerned about not only the academic growth of the children, but the socio-emotional growth. And so it's very important that you include both in any presentation that you make, because parents are really, really concerned about both issues. So I think what you're saying, David, makes absolutely sense, because each individual grade, in terms of their growth, it's very different. And so the things that you see at a 5 and 6 year old are different than the things that you see at a preschool, a preteen young person. So I think it would be good to have that individual, and that will invite parents of that cohort to come and really question, because they're concerned too.
Thank you. Thank you. And I suppose the more the merrier, but I certainly want to mention that during a number of the recent board meetings, we've had schools present, and I've been, you know, heartened by just how much focus the district has put in the areas of social and emotional learning. So many of those presentations do share a lot about what you know, what's been done, but you probably can never have enough. So I'm sure Dr.
With
Iverson.
all due respect, they're much more a display of what's happening. It's not too much back and forth, with all due respect. David,
Sure.
I can remember us being in the engagement committee and it being a much more collaborative environment where it was back and forth. You really, and parents get intimidated. So they get this big thing from the principal, and then they say, okay, I better not say much. It has to be in an environment where they feel that they can say, what do you see? You need to say, what are you seeing at home that you didn't see before? What are things happening now that you didn't see happening before? Parents are really concerned. And it's not only academic, it's about these poor young people don't have social emotional engagement because of this COVID. And it has to be an environment that makes you feel comfortable with saying, you know what, when my kid comes home, blah, 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 whatever. And David, you remember when we had those meetings and engagement. But I truly believe that has to be the structure. Thank you.
Suggestions that I will consider and taking, and when we start planning. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
What were you going to say, Dave?
I don't have
I
anything
was going to
else.
say, I've had some conversations with principals who said that there was a big hump to get over when the kids first came back. And there's a sense that some things are beginning to smooth it out now, at least in some schools.
So taking Sylvia's suggestion into consideration, is that something that you feel like would be something that we would focus in on at an CC meeting, or perhaps should it be something that we bring up more?
I think we bring up the SEL as one of the subtopics that the principals talk about.
Okay.
Academics and SEL.
In a place and time where it can be in a collaborative experience, where parents get the opportunity to share their specific concerns.
But it should be age appropriate. It should be a collaborative environment for each age group. For instance, a preschool student is very different than a kid that's going into middle school. So it has to be much more collaborative in each cohort. But it's important that you do that and make it much more relaxed, not necessarily to a goal, much more sharing of issues that parents are.
So then
seeing.
what you would do is you'd split into groups, right? You might have the beginning of the presentation in which you'd each principal would give their 5-minute speech, and then you'd go off and split off and talk about.
That would be a good idea. That would be a great idea. Great idea.
Thank you, Sylvia.
You're welcome.
Brazetta?
Just a question. When we have these meetings, if we can make sure that principals and the teachers avoid using acronyms and abbreviations, because oftentimes people who are not in the field of education, those can be intimidating. So just like we're saying CEC, we know what that means, but maybe some people from the community don't know. So just a word of caution. Let's use the full term.
Fantastic suggestion.
Thank you.
Stephen?
As a past attendee of many of the Superintendent Teas, I found that when you had all the principals presenting, it got long. People got bored, because if you have a 7-year-old and you're listening to high school, middle school, and everything else, you really wanted to come to the Superintendent Tea to kind of get a focus on what's happening overall, but it was just getting too long. And then it got long-winded. And you had the fire department, the police department, the minister from the left, the rabbi from the right, everybody was there. And those things can be kind of separated. We had the politicians come in, everybody was there, and especially during election time, then it really got big. So my suggestion would be for whatever you want to call a superintendent here, to get people to know the administration through the superintendent and her views on things, and touch on the social emotional, touch on the IB, touch on the ALP, touch on even things like Mona, what she was doing with Bradley, and all the things that went on that people would go, oh, wow, without making it a 6-hour, 5-hour, 4-hour, 3-hour long thing. We have to learn to start balancing our time of people who have jobs. And you can't just sit there and tell every parent, hey, come on up and spend 4 hours in the day. You really have to balance out. So hopefully the PTA has suggested that we do a back to school night, maybe with everybody, and the parent can come see everybody. But let's focus maybe the superintendent on the things that she wants to get out to the public without making it, an extraordinary event to show Highview Bailey. Leave that for the Board of Ed presentations, when they have it, and let the superintendent, whatever you want to call it, be a superintendent meeting.
Thank you, Stephen. I believe, Dr. Iverson, you said that you had that was it for you?
That's all I had on my list right now.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay, up next, a discussion around the district-wide communications policy. So David brought this to my attention, and Dave was going to kind of take it away, and we'll ask some questions on how we should proceed in this regard.
Well, I've looked at one of our goals, and I have seen that it's been sitting on the books since the communications committee had it listed as a charge for our committee several years ago, and no one has touched it in a couple of years. And so the question is, and I know why. It is fraught, it is deep, it is turgid, it is full of huge amounts of detail. And the question is, do you want me to go over everything in the meeting, or do you want a homework assignment? Okay, so let me, can you bring up the packet? Can you share screen so that I can show you the front end of this?
I'm just opening it now.
Okay. Okay, so of all, there's an entire list of various charges for the committee, and this is one of them. One of our CEC charges from the point at which we combine with the communications committee is make recommendations to the board for a district-wide communications policy with procedures. Okay, the questions that I thought that we needed to go over are, first, what communications related policies and procedures do we already have? And I have a list of them. There are 4 or 5 policies there. Then after that, what existing school district policies and procedures are available? You may understand that the school district has a policy manual in which the board, one of the pillars on which we govern besides hiring a superintendent, is that we write down a long list of procedures on how to do things. And once the board adopts a policy manual, then the district has to function based upon that set of rules. And so the communications committee thought that it would be a great idea to have a communications policy, okay? There are, in terms of how our policy manual works, occasionally a board member or the community will come up with an idea of a new set of rules, but by and large what happens is that New York state law evolves, and so we have, there's sort of an army of lawyers statewide that takes a look at what needs to change in policy manuals so that our rules are still legal. And the 2 main groups that come up with policy templates for us to evolve through are Erie One BOCES, one of the boards of cooperative educational services. They specialize in policies. And the other one is the New York State School Board Association. So both sets have their own numbering systems and grand sets of templates for all of the policies that there are. So one thing you can do if you want a large and complex set of policies is you can pull information from either Erie One BOCES, whom we actually have an agreement with, and much of our existing policy manual is based upon their system, or NISPA, the New York State School Board Association. So I have some examples of the sorts of things that they provide. Then I have some sample Board of Education governance handbook pages. That is, once you get to be a board member, there is now, although there wasn't until I think about last year, and thanks to Ashley and some of our other committee members, a governance handbook which has a communication section in it. And in addition to that, I've checked policies, sample policies that I picked out for uniqueness having to do with communications from different school districts throughout New York State, and put those in as a way of doing research on what sorts of things could be in a communications policy. Then once we've educated ourselves, seen what we have, seen what it is that's available, what policies and procedures do we need? What do we think needs to be in a communications policy? Are there any holes in the system that we've already got? And if so, can we just modify our existing policies, or do we need to create a whole communications policy? And then the question is, based upon all of that feedback that I would hope I would get a wish list from people as to what they want to see in a communications policy. How can we most efficiently create the policies and procedures? Do we hand various items off to the administration? Do we do things, do we have to draft things ourselves? Obviously, legal will review things at some point in the normal policy process, or is it cumbersome enough that we would go back to either NISPA or Erie One BOCES and ask for something to be written up? So those are the 4 questions. That's the outline. I've got about 18 pages worth of stuff, and we can either plow through it now, or I can have Jamal hand this out to everybody. That is, send it out on the distribution list for the email, and we can come back and review it once people have had a chance to look at it individually. What do people think?
So no.
Would you like to page through it so that we get an idea of what we're looking at, but so that people can come up with opinions?
Sure.
So here's a sample. School district policy. That's something that we have within our school district, right? So you have this little paragraph under school district media. It says, as the official spokesperson, the superintendent and his or her designee shall issue all news releases concerning the district. All statements of the board will be released through the board president. So that's a communications rule. Yes, Sylvia.
I have to tell you, I always look at it from the point of view of a parent. Parents are working all the time. They have these children that they're raising. This is too much.
Okay.
Too much.
So
you have to consider the consumer. What does the consumer need? You take
so my pet peeve as a consumer.
But it's just so much.
Yes. My pet peeve as a consumer is that there is no standard that I know of in any of these policies for a response time. That is, I agree. Heard statements in which people will send an email or make a phone call, and it'll go out into the ether, and they'll get no response for 5 days or something, right?
Absolutely.
There should be some sort of standard to that level.
When you
and
look
for
at
that reason,
this,
I would push for a rule like that.
It's daunting. It's daunting. I mean, how do we piece this out so that parents feel, okay, these are the pieces that work for me? I'm always looking at it from parents' point of view. They're all busy. They're very, very focused on their children, but they also have other responsibilities. We've got to have chunks for each group that needs it. And I don't know how you do that. That's a very important thing to say. There are some larger things that you need to know in terms of the district, and some things that are unique to your particular group of students. Whether it was, say, if you're a special needs parent, you have different needs than somebody who has a regular school environment. So I don't know, but this is daunting. I have to tell you, I find it daunting.
It's definitely a lot. And I think that, that David's number 4 point was, how can we most efficiently create these policies and procedures? So, whether that is, again, us doing it, in tandem, as a part of the communications and community engagement and communications committee. So the committee is charged with doing this, and seemingly, as David mentioned, it just has never happened up to this point. So the most efficient way, I don't have an answer for it either, but we are looking to you just made a suggestion that I think will move us forward a little bit. You said chunk it down, so that perhaps that means doing, different pieces at different meetings and taking a little while before we come up with the whole process. And we're open to hear from other folks what their thoughts are on what the best way is to efficiently get this completed.
The next thought on my mind is if you don't think that sending out everything to a large group of people is a good idea, we could also ask for volunteers. And if you ask a volunteer to create an entire communications process, it'll probably not happen. But if you can, as Sylvia said, chunk it down, there could be pieces that somebody could volunteer to gather suggestions for. So one way of chunking this thing is to determine who the players are. That is, let's say that the player is a parent, and the parent wants to communicate with the district. So that's one portion of a communications plan. Let's say that another chunk is the district wants to communicate with the public. That's something that I would actually push off on the administration if I could do that. So that's one way. That's one simple way of breaking it down, of breaking it in half. Can you suggest any other ways of making the task smaller?
I believe that question is open to everybody. Correct, David?
Correct.
I would say David Lloyd Court.
Yes.
I would say that your presentation has been extremely great, because I don't know, and I think that's your intention, of letting everyone be au fait of our responsibilities and the responsibilities of the committee per se, and not that one will be involved with all that has been identified. And if I am wrong, can you correct me, please?
Okay, could you repeat that?
Now, I am saying that what you have presented is for everyone to be aware of. It's just like you getting into something, this is what you have to be aware of.
Correct.
And not for you to know it verbatim, recite it, or anything of that nature, but so that you know it, so that when you make a presentation or when you get involved to an extent, then you know what is expected.
Okay.
David, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Suppose we make it, I'm always thinking of the consumer, because if it gets to be too much, they just don't. I'm going to tell you as a former principal, you have to do smaller chunks. You just do, whether it makes sense or not. So if we say, who's the consumer? So for instance, if we have somebody who's coming into the school, what things do they need to do to navigate this system? And the pieces we pull out are the pieces that are for that particular group in communicating with the school and the district. The pieces you pull out for the next group is different than the pieces you pulled out for the one before. Adolescence is a very traumatic time. So that would be a big piece, and you would probably put into that lots of interaction ongoing, because adolescence is a very traumatic time. So let's consider start with the consumer, and what pieces does that consumer need? A special needs parent has different needs than somebody who has a typical needs child. So let's think about that. That's just how I look at it.
Okay,
because I realize that this stuff is good, but it's only good if I can use it.
So then we break it down both by age level and regular education versus special education.
I agree.
Those are the two breakdowns.
Yeah.
Okay. So if
I'm
I
willing
come
to
back
be
to you
part of
and
it.
I say, would you be willing to study or find someone who can figure out what the communications needs of the special education elementary school parent are, then we can go forward. Is that correct?
Sure, no problem.
Okay. Denise?
Hi, everybody. So I just wanted to sort of get clarification with Sylvia, because I think that what we're talking about, if I'm understanding it correctly, really is about sort of all of this language and wordiness around just overall policies that need to be in place, right? And perhaps extrapolating from all of this data, all of this information, what are the most important pieces of information that any singular person, depending on where they are in the sort of the life cycle of the district, what are the things that we really need them to understand and know as parents? And how can we take these broader policies and look at them more closely and say, okay, this is something that every parent should know if they have a kindergarten or if they have somebody in the middle school, and maybe creating a very sort of concise document that really focuses on, this is what we think you really need to know. However, moving forward, if you want more background, more detail, this is where you should go. Is that what we're trying to do?
I'm thinking that at this point, what we can do is come up with a needs list. If we come up with a needs list, then we can go back behind the scenes and figure out whether the policies match with the needs.
Okay.
And then as a result of that, so say, for example, the need, the pet peeve I talked about, which is a parent wants to contact a teacher, and the teacher, within a certain period of time, you expect that if you have an issue, that you'll resolve it with the teacher. And if you can't resolve it with the teacher, you go to the principal. If you can't resolve it with the principal, you go to the superintendent, and so on and so forth. There's that grand hierarchy. But what if you go and try and contact the teacher and you get no response for 5 days? There's a problem. Okay.
Right.
So now I have to institute a rule from the point of view of the administration to make sure that my teacher responds within a certain period of time. But when the teacher's absent, okay, and wasn't there to respond, is there a procedure for a substitute person to come in and take care of things? It gets very fraught, right?
Yeah.
So you would want your administration to come up with that set of rules, but you would want your parent to come and say, I need a response within 2 days.
Correct.
Right. And then the administration comes back and says, well, this is how we can make that happen. This is the set of rules we would come up with. That would be the set of procedures. And there would be something in the policy, the manual, that says the administration will come up with a set of procedures for ensuring that the teachers are responsive. Okay.
Got it. Okay.
That's how you do it.
Yeah. Because I think, again, if I'm looking at it from the perspective of a parent, as Sylvia has suggested, there's so much information out there. So is there a way to sort of, again, hone in on the priorities that we have determined every parent should know? You should be able to have this information at your fingertips. You don't have to read through 1,000,001 things. It's sort of, again, a much more shortened version of some of the more wordy language that can serve a parent at any given stage of their journey through the district. I think Sylvia, and you would be able to clarify whether that's sort of where you're going with this.
On point, Denise. That's what I'm saying. You are the consumer. You're the one that has to understand the directions, not me, not the Board of Education. Okay, what procedures do you need to follow if you need to you have an issue with your child in the school. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It should
Correct.
be all this lingo. It shouldn't be all these acronyms. It should
I'll
be
show you a
that
document a little
simple.
further down just so we can see if we're at a point where something makes sense. Yes, scroll down until you see a procedure, like the NISBA procedure. Mr. Sheehan?
Yeah, what is the purpose of this document?
What is the purpose of this document? You remember the 4 things at the top?
What was the head? What's the title of this document? Is this actually the policies of the Board of Ed?
No, not yet.
So the first section is the policies of the existing policies of the Board of Ed. The second section is a set of other documents that have communications policies in them. And then you get to do your own you get to say, I like this, I don't like that. I'd like to incorporate these things that are not currently in my document in my policy manual. So I went out and found other people's policies and other school districts as possible examples. So this is a collection of what we have and what we could use.
I saw.
So is there anything in this document that's
You
binding?
scrolled through this thing 3 times and haven't found the
I saw it earlier.
Okay.
Well, that says there's a problem, right?
Well, I can see
So
that
again,
your imagination is
this
off.
document is not
Okay,
something.
so there's Area 1 BOCES. Now keep going.
This was the NISBA.
This is the handbook.
This is the NISBA handbook.
This is the Board of Education handbook.
So
Scroll a little
No,
further.
not yet. She's still working on her math.
A little further. Right, so you have questions and answers.
You could have
Okay.
what?
What if I have children in the district?
Let's finish your homework before we start talking about more food, okay?
You're looking for a numeric procedure. Okay, all
I
right.
want to pass it again.
Yes, your pagination is messed up. So
Is it searchable
try it.
with a Control F?
And I think this is exactly, what Sylvia's pointing out, right? It's like, oh my goodness, you've got to like dig through all of this information. Like, is there a quick start guide? I need a quick start guide.
So for clarity's sake, David put this together, not as what is going to be for parents.
Didn't look like this when I put that together. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, this would not be what parents are seeing. This is kind of a captured list of the various different things that were shown on that first page. And our design is to ultimately have something that is far shorter, more concise, more clear for parents. But it takes taking the big capture thing, so most important, cutting out the fat and
got it.
So that's what we're looking to do. David, I know I saw it earlier. I'm not sure why. I don't know what happened. The document looks different to the David I looked at it earlier.
Ms. Horn?
Sorry?
Yes. So why don't we begin with the consumer? Why don't we get parents in different cohorts and say, what do you need from us? And then you match it with what we can give. And that works better.
But I think, Sylvia, that's hard. That's harder because sometimes I don't think people even know what they want until it's in front of them. So if we can sort of proactively say, because some of us are parents in the district, right? And we're a little bit closer to it. Yeah. So maybe between us, we can say this would have been helpful for me at any, at any point in time. And we can start with a baseline that can always be updated accordingly. But I think it's harder because you don't even know what you want because there's so much, right, that you can consider about, okay, what do I need to know? But I think that certainly we can begin with, what would be a great resource, a very concise resource for somebody who is just entering the district? What do you need to know?
But how do you do that unless you really speak to the people who are going to be entering the system? It's a very tricky situation. You have
now it's paginated properly.
Yeah.
So now it's possible to actually find something. Okay. There, communicating with the media. There.
Okay.
Okay, there is a sample procedure, right? You get down to the point, and in this case, the procedure happens to be for the board, right? So this is how a board member would use a procedure. So communicating with the media. So you make sure that if you're gonna deal with the media, that you don't do anything you shouldn't. So 1, the board president or designee will serve as the board spokesperson to the media on issues regarding board actions. Okay, so that means there's 7 of us. You don't want the 7 hydra talking. So the board president is the person in charge. 2, the superintendent or in the superintendent's absence, a specified designee shall be the official district spokesperson. Right. So then you've got the district superintendent in there. So you go down step by step and you tell for this particular audience, which is the Board of Education, what you do. Now, if you're a parent and you need to make a contact, then you make a procedure like this. You'd say, number 1, go contact your teacher if the issue is with the teacher. Number 2, if you don't get satisfaction from the teacher, go to the principal. Number 3, if you don't get satisfaction from the principal, go to the superintendent or the superintendent staff. Number 4, if you don't get satisfaction from the superintendent, go to the board, right? You'd have your procedure. Okay. So that's the sort of thing that you would get down to if you have procedures, and there'd be a set of items back in the policy manual that would support all that with all of the detailed rules.
And now something that David said earlier, essentially that's, this one sheet that we're looking at now is one, and this is more specific to the board, but we're looking to say, what does that look like for parents' communication to the district? What does that look like for district communication to the parents? What does that look like for committee communication to the board? So various stakeholders communication to one another. I imagine there would be some form of policy to dictate all of those, and slowly but surely we're going to look to create what that looks like.
So getting back to my original comment as to what is the purpose of this, is so this is basically what we're looking for, is a primer to the actual policies that have been adopted, because this looks like it's enforceable because you have shalls in there. So has this page been adopted by the board? And when it does link to policies, it's very difficult, frankly, I haven't seen the entire document and we're looking at pages, but presumably this is linked to policies that have been adopted by the board and I see some of them are from 2012. And so the question is that still considered to be best practices and policies of the board? So you might well work on that at the same time. And I'll tell you, at the town, we've undertaken an enormous task of taking the police policy manual, which had some of them quite old, 1993, but still good policy. But we're recognizing that it's still good policy and we're updating the date. And it makes a world of difference, because when I look at something that's a policy from 2012, well, is that still the current board's policy? But be that it may, I think I understand this now. This is basically taking the actual policy, which is going to contain some legalese because people are going to litigate if you have policy and they don't like the policy. Versus something as to basically a frequently asked questions type document, if that's what this is. Again, I'm simply asking, what is the purpose of this document versus the actual policy manual?
So there are 2 pieces to the goal. One goal says come up with the policies, and the other goal says come up with the procedures. The procedures are the things that people actually use. The policies are the legalese. So the board has to adopt the policies, and then we have the underlying procedures, and that's what you use.
I got it.
And so question for you, Francis, what is the process by which you have gone, what you just described with the police? What's the process? What does the structure of the team look like that is working through those updates?
Well, we've actually hired somebody that has considerable expertise in best practice and has updated lots of manuals. As a matter of fact, our interim police chief, and it's not by coincidence, has updated many manuals over his time. And so he's doing that during his interim period here. It's probably going to take a year working with a large group, and the policy manual is then going to go through and get comments from the public and obviously town board and so forth before they actually get implemented. But the main thing is that the hub here is having somebody who knows what best practices is in the current, because what was best practices 20 years ago may not be best practices now, or even 10 years ago, or even pre-COVID for all we know, right? So we really have to rethink policies. But we also then, I agree with Sylvia, that we then have to come up with basically a frequently asked questions type thing that tells them what they need to do without too much of all that legalese in there. No, understanding that it's not necessarily binding. When you start to take out things, you may actually take out something that's really important, and you don't want to be held to that standard. If you really want to take a look, you got to go back to the policies. I hope that answers your question.
It does.
It's a very broad coalition of people, but part of that has to be somebody who knows best practices.
Got it. Denise,
is your hand still up, or did you have a new comment?
No, I'm taking it down.
Okay.
Let's talk about Denise.
Denise Alamo.
Yes, I think that was an old hand.
Okay.
Okay. So, Dr.
Can I
Iverson,
add something? I'm sorry.
Dr. Iverson.
Yes.
So my opinion at this point is that we need to break this down into smaller pieces and gather information from our consumers, that is our parents, which involves some survey work. And then we need an expert who has time to devote to this. That looks like the answer to question 4 of my original set of questions. But what is your opinion? What do you think?
So I'm going to go a totally different direction from where I've worked with this in other districts. When you're updating, I think you did mention for the group, BOCES and NISBA. When districts are going through I think I understand the committee's trying to do. There's, for example, you listed the policies there that all connect to work that would come under this committee, media, community involvement. But we have district policies already on those. So from my experience, the first thing you do is NISBA and or BOCES, whoever we decide to go with. I think BOCES is cheaper. That there is a cost. Trustee Warner with NISBA. Every state, they have the School Board Association has that service they provide to the district for a cost. I would say it's worth it because that association stays current with new legislation, new laws, and they update those policies religiously. So at any time a district is looking to update a particular policy, you can get the newest language of that policy from NISBA, because these associations the policy applies to every district in the state. So every district has a policy, probably this number 3110. Let's name this. We don't create our own policies. This comes from NISBA. So they are the source that are the experts on what the policy should be in every district policy manual. So you start there. They give you the updates on these 6 policies, the new language that has been added and or deleted, and we look at those. And I would look at these policies, look at the additions and all, work with the board, and we change that policy and decide on whether we want to adopt, then we adopt it. And then the procedure piece, the procedure is how that policy will look, is where the administration then takes what the board agrees to as policy and the changes, and then they have the service where they give you suggested ways that this can look, and there is where this committee then gets involved. So that legwork's done, so no one has to do that. That's a volume of work. You start with what they give you in terms of samples, like you have, And then the committee looks at that and make it relative to Greenburgh. So that is the most expeditious way to do it. It may not be the most cost effective. I don't know what New York charges, but this is not layman work. This is work that the state needs to give you first, then you adopt it to your district. So the procedures piece, we can manipulate that the way we want, but I think that's the way. I'm not saying we should go that way. I'm just saying to you, that's the way I've dealt with it. Never have I, as a superintendent, developed procedures from scratch. I've always had a template from the state.
From the policy.
Yes, or from policy and procedures. They will give you recommended procedures across the state, how that looks, and then you can then tailor it to your district. And so that's how I've done it. I mean, I'm very open to this process. I like that it's inclusive. I do think this committee can get involved with, once we see what's there, once the changes have been sent to us around how the procedures look across the state, we can then say, well, not here in Greenburgh, we prefer this. And you can make the regulations relative to our district. But have a group start that work from scratch when it's already done. I mean, it's worth a discussion if we want to invest in that.
So, all right. So that's my original, that is actually my original outline. If you look at question one was, what do we already have? And what we already have comes from Erie One BOCES. What other things are available to us? And the sources were Erie One BOCES, NISBA, and sample procedures. We did have something from the governance handbook, but the governance handbook came from NISBA, and several sample communications related policies I pulled off of board docs, and those are existing policies in other school districts, which were generated either from Erie One BOCES or NISBA. So I'm with you there in terms of what our standardized sources are. Then I was starting to look for holes. What policies and procedures do we need? And then how can we most efficiently create these policies and procedures? Now, what I'm hearing you saying is that they can also provide the procedures, and perhaps the procedures are the level at which we can then critique what's going on. So then the next step is to get procedures from Erie One BOCES and present one or two of them so that we don't bite off more than we can chew all at once to the committee.
That's what I'm saying. And say we would start with 3110. We look at that policy first, see what are the changes in that policy. Then we look at how that policy is being, procedures, how it's being rolled out across the state in certain districts. And then we look to see how we want it to look in Greenburgh. And then we change that.
And if there are any holes that are too big, then our charge that we came up with of actually creating a communications policy, which doesn't seem to be what Erie One BOCES has done, is something that we go in for or don't go in for, depending on how big the holes are. That makes sense.
Right.
Giovanna?
You're on mute, Giovanna, if you are speaking.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I just have a question. Are these policies for like parents, then administration, school administration, and families? Also, is that for, or?
Some pieces are for families, some pieces are for teachers. So if policy says, here's what you do, teacher, then obviously the audience is the teacher. If the policy says, you need to get something from the school district, here's what you do, parent, then the audience is the parents. So different audiences for different procedures.
In my point of view as a parent, because if I contact a teacher, and it's a teamwork, right? So I don't think it should be a policy for a teacher. If I send you an email today, you should answer me in 1 or 2 days. Why do we have to have a policy about that? So if the teacher is working with families and it's a problem with a child, like a child is getting behind or something, so that's why it's a teacher. She contacts the family. So why do we have to have a policy about that? I'm sorry, but it's like those things I don't think shouldn't even be there, because that's why a teacher is there, to be working with the family, to be responsible for the student to learn. So it's just my opinion as a parent. But I did have that problem. And I still have one problem, that I contact one teacher that I didn't have a parent conference with him. I sent him like 3 emails already. He didn't answer me yet.
So this is exactly why I would want there to be the rule. So there's no rule right now. Well, excuse me. I can't say there's no rule anywhere. There's maybe not a standard rule for everybody. So the general idea is if there's a standard rule for everybody, then and everybody understands and follows that same rule, then it is less likely that that things will fall apart. Most of the time, you don't need the rule, but once in a while, you do.
All right.
Thank you, Giovanna.
Thank you.
Samantha?
Hi, everybody. I'm playing catch up a little bit, and I apologize for having to step away. So if I ask something that has already been addressed, just tell me it's been addressed, and I'll catch you offline. But I have a question about how this will all be presented. And respectfully, Giovanna, I'd like to disagree and just say that for transparency and governance and the contract that we all implicitly enter into, it's nice to have, it's mandatory to have all of these things. The more transparent the policy is, the better. If I know what to expect, I know what's expected of me, things are organizationally, things are better. So I agree with this work, and I really, really agree with Dr. Iverson's statement that we start with a template from an organization that does this obsessively. And I think that we have that resource, so we should use it. My question is, how are these presented to the end user? And what I'm thinking specifically is in line with the work that we've done around the communications committee, and especially around the website committee, because if this is going to be policy and legalese and it goes in the board docs and it becomes a giant handbook or something, are you envisioning a web page with an FAQ? And if you're envisioning a web page with an FAQ, do we then hyperlink? The FAQ is in really simple language. It's bullet point 1, 2, 3, but there's a little hyperscript that hyperlinks to the board policy if someone wants to read the legalese. I would like, as a parent and as someone who's done work on these committees, to think holistically, soup to nuts. Not only where do we get the information, but how's it going to look at the end, and what tools do we have to make it simple and accessible to our end user? Because when you use those tools, you have the freedom to get as messy and in the weeds as you want to. You can link to it. I don't have to read it as a parent. I get my bullet point, but if I really want to go down that rabbit hole, I can. So I think we give ourselves more freedom when we look at how it's going to be presented holistically. I hope I'm not being redundant to anything that's been said. Thank you.
There are certain standards that say don't have too many, it used to be too many words per page, right? So you space things out, you make sure that things are as clear as possible. And if there are 20 different exceptions, then you don't present the 20 different exceptions and the procedures, because then nobody can follow it, right? But yes, you have the other text available if you need it. So I agree. Sylvia?
You're on mute if you're speaking, Sylvia. Okay. Sylvia, where you still have your hand, you had your,
Sorry. Samantha really is the best middle ground, because we're talking about, yes, there are procedures and policies you have to follow. It makes absolute sense. But Samantha is also aware that it has to make sense for the end user. So Samantha, I love that you came in and said, yeah, okay, I really believe in these policies and procedures, but now we've got to put it together in a way that the end user understands and can use them. So it's a blending. And I think we've come to that conclusion. It's much harder than it is to express, really, but.
Thank you. And so now I'll ask this of David and Dr. Iverson from here, in terms of communicating with BOCES about the potential for starting this process in the most efficient manner. Is that administration that's going to reach out to BOCES? Should David or I be reaching out to BOCES? What's your thought on?
Probably Ivy.
You're on mute, Dr. Iverson.
So Ivy and I did begin talking about this today, and so we would reach out to BOCES to get the updated, what's the latest on these policies? What language has been changed, and they will send you the markup. If the state is similar to others, you will get the latest version of how these policies have been updated with the legal language, with trends that have changed that are required now by school districts, things that they keep up. They are trained, and they have, like I said, a department that just does this. So they will send that. And then we'll look at what they send us with what our policy has. And so that's the beginning. And that's where the board gets involved in this committee. They give it, they send you with the strikeouts where the word will, there could be a verb change. Sometimes it's just that simple, if from will to shall. It could change around just that. And it shows you the language that's changed according to law.
Right.
School boards must now adopt, because this is what becomes the governing piece of how the district now must operate in these areas of community involvement. So you get that first, and you look at that, and then you look at your procedures in your district for how you implement that. And you see if it aligns with that new language, because you may have to change your procedures and that verb as well. If you have will and they're saying, no, this is mandated shall, we have to change our procedures to that. And then you look, they recommend sometimes by grade level how this policy looks, if it's applicable. And then that's when you get into the discussion this committee can get involved with. How does this look in Greenburgh? What's realistic? Do we do this? Do we not? I mean, you can't deviate too much, so because some of the procedures are very clearly what must also happen. I mean, they give you some leeway, but it's a guide to help you think about and apply it. So Ivy will call and get the updated policies. And then this committee can look at it with the strikeouts. That's what you decide, board members here can look at the policy updates with the strikeouts. Then we would get the sample templates they recommend, how other districts, like you did, Trustee Warner, how this looks in certain, according to NISBA or BOCES. They're not necessarily going to give you an example for any district. This is how holistically and generally, this is how this could look. Then some districts just adopt it and say, oh, this is what we do. We don't have to change anything. This is going to be our procedure too. Or that's when this committee can look at that and say, is this realistic to us? Is this, and then change it. There's a lot of places you can be involved, but I think that legwork can be done for us. And so if you will let Ivy and I check on that, Trustee Thomas and Warner, I mean, there may be a cost.
Come back with the procedure.
I mean, so if it's okay to look in terms of getting back with the cost for how you get these new policies and all, to me, it is a service worth having, because you never have outdated policies. You can always, your policies are always current.
We have an existing service. I don't know of our existing level of service.
That's what Ivy can check on.
Just doing the policies, or whether we've got the package with the procedures. So we have to check on that.
Ivy and I talked today. I thought she understood we are updating. You want to update these policies relative to this committee. And then we want to look specifically at how at procedures for how these
Policies can be implemented.
are going to be implemented. Yes.
Perfect.
Very
Thank
good.
you, Dr. Iverson.
All right, so I have my marching orders.
I have mine, and I'll be ready for the next meeting with, I'm going to focus on just these 5 policies and the sample templates for how this ABOCES and or NISBA says this is just how it can look in your district. And the committee then can begin to look one at a time. I think it's overwhelming.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, it's overwhelming to look at 5. I would get 1 policy a month through. I mean, it's a lot of work. And so it's an ongoing kind of procedure.
Okay, thank you.
One question though.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, the teachers union, does that body have any place here or representative from the teachers union since we are making these policies?
Yes.
Go ahead, Dr. Iverson. I'm just
sorry.
saying, what would their role be?
So, we look at it, when you get the procedures and you're rolling out in the district, you do have to have in mind unions, and you can't have things in there that go against the union. So that's how various people put their eyes on it. So the administration will look at it aligned with what the contracts and all say. You would look at it from a parent perspective of how you see it rolling out, what you would like to have in it. Several people look at it before it's really adopted to ensure that it is aligned with practices that we have in the district. Sometimes they're very obsolete, and our policies and procedures are so obsolete, we haven't changed them in years, and even the verbiage is different. So, or the language is different, like I said. So yeah, unions don't look at it necessarily. They can. I meet with the unions every month, and if say I would have that conversation, we're looking to change this policy and these procedures. What's happening in your buildings? How do you roll this out? How does this look at ECP, at Jackson? And those principals will talk about how that looks. Sometimes you can have in these procedures just something very generic that applies to all of them. And sometimes you do need to spell out for each building in your procedures how it looks differently. That's where this committee is very valuable to helping us with that. But it's a process. So we would start with that. The next meeting, we would have 3110. How about in 3111, the updates on the policies in terms of what they're recommending we change and recommended
Underlying procedures.
Yes, and then we can look at that together and then decide what's our value around it? What do we want? And because we can, and even in the policy, they give you some leeway to, this is what they strongly recommend your policy changes to. But districts can, if we still don't want to do some of that, I mean, they give you a little wiggle room, but not much. But it's a very
depends on whether it's a recommendation or whether it's law.
And sometimes the verb, you're so right, we'll say is recommended. And so if sometimes it's safe to keep that, although you may do it. So.
Got it. Well, thank you, everybody, for all your thoughts here. I think we have our way forward, and I definitely appreciate all of the thoughts. So, in terms of up next, any additional questions, comments, or concerns that anybody would like to address this evening? Hearing none, I move that we close. Samantha.
I'm so sorry. I just took a minute to find my hand. Quickly, and you can tell me this isn't under the purview of this committee. I guess part of my question is whether it's going to be. I have spoken to the board in meetings a couple of times now about work being done on nutrition. There's been some discussion about where that's going to land. The last time I came before the board, it was to point out current policy on community involvement regarding nutrition. Has there been any moves made toward opening up that conversation? And do we know if it's going to land here with this committee?
So at first, it sounded to be education and wellness to me. Can you just give us some inkling of what the community involvement piece would be?
Sure. So very quickly to catch everybody up, the Highview PTA adopted as one of its advocacy points for this year to increase student nutrition and wellness overall. And we were taking a look at the food services contract. And we were doing that at the same time as the food services contract was changing to a new director. So we now have a new director in place. And that director has put into place a number of improvements that we parents have noticed at the elementary level, but the work continues. Part of the contract with Aramark is parent involvement, student involvement, feedback, continued feedback on the menu, on the types of food, and we have requested continued discussion about overall wellness, especially as it pertains to nutrition. So that would, by type, fit under education and wellness, but we never received any confirmation on whether that was something that committee was interested to take on, and I was under the impression they were not. The last time I was able to come before the board, I had found policy, and I'm sorry I don't have it right in front of me, and I'm also sorry that the dog just got home from his walk. I had found policy on nutrition and wellness in the district, and that it stipulates in current policy the levels of involvement of teachers, staff, students, the ways to give feedback, all of those things. So I guess the reason I'm bringing it up in this committee is because by name it would fall under wellness, but the type of work stipulated in current board documents is more the type of work that we do. The ENW, I'm on that committee, and they don't do this kind of feedback, ongoing conversations, marching orders kind of work. That's much more of a current status report sort of committee in the way that it's currently realized. So I guess I'm asking for any backdoor conversations. Is there any update on whether or not that's something we as a committee may end up taking on, or have you not gotten there yet?
I have not gotten any updates on that area. David, from you've been doing this longer.
The only thing that I have heard is that there was some difficulty as to whether the composition of the wellness committee as required by policy might be inconsistent with the composition of the education committee, and that we combined several committees together a few years ago because people said there are too many committees. And so then the question is, are the committees going to end up getting split up when we get to the end of the school year? And how can we accomplish some work this side of the end of the school year? Because you can't wait on nutrition until until July. So that's as much as I know. I have no objection to taking on anything that anyone else is not willing to take on. But the first thing to do is to go and look at the policy and see who needs to be on the committee.
And again, just so for clarity's sake, the reason why we think perhaps this is the place is just because we may look to do some type of outreach to students and parents to further understand what they are looking for from the school lunch program and how we can get to a healthier stage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So we can go back and look at the policy between now and the next time we have a meeting,
as well as to have a brief discussion about it prior to the next Education and Wellness Committee to see if whatever those policies are things that can be addressed within that committee. It does. I'm on that one too, but it sounds to me like that's the place where it should be housed.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'd also just like to remind, based on all of our conversation tonight, that we do have access to a community organizing nonprofit arm within the district in our PTAs if they're activated as such. And I think we need to remember to use that resource.
Thank you for that reminder. I believe there's a PTA meeting in my calendar tomorrow. I'll be there. Thank you, Samantha. All right, everybody. There weren't any additional questions, comments, concerns. I will ask one last time before we close. Well, thank you, everybody, for the evening. I move that we close this evening's meeting.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.